Let's get one thing straight. You don't have a carb problem. You have a delivery problem. We've been conditioned to view a slice of bread or a bowl of pasta as a biological ticking time bomb. But the truth is, your body actually wants those carbohydrates. It just doesn't want them hitting your system like a tidal wave. If you've been feeling that mid-afternoon brain fog or struggling with stubborn weight, you aren't broken. You're just mismanaging your internal plumbing. I'm going to show you how to flip the script. We're moving away from the era of deprivation and into the era of biological leverage. By the end of this session, you'll have the override framework, a set of tactical shifts that can dampen your body's sugar response by over 70% without changing a single ingredient on your plate. We're going to turn your metabolism into a high-performance engine rather than a fragile system on the verge of a blowout. The true genius of metabolic mastery doesn't happen at the gym or in the supplement aisle. It happens in the quiet, dark environment of your refrigerator through a process of sophisticated molecular restructuring known as retrogradation. When you initially apply heat to starches, whether you're boiling Yukon Golds or steaming a pot of jasmine rice, the starch granules undergo gelatinization. In this state, the hydrogen bonds between the amylose and amylopectin molecules break, causing the starch to swell with water and expand into an open, porous structure. Biologically, this is the equivalent of laying out a red carpet for your digestive enzymes. Your body can dismantle these open starches almost instantly, flooding your portal vein with glucose and triggering a massive inflammatory insulin surge. However, the kitchen alchemy protocol demands that you interrupt this process with a 24-hour hibernation period. By cooling these cooked starches to roughly 40 degrees, for at least 12 to 24 hours, you trigger a chemical metamorphosis. As the temperature drops, the starch molecules begin to realign and snap together into a dense, crystalline lattice. Think of this as shifting the physical state of your food from a pile of loose, easily scattered sand into a solid, impenetrable brick. This newly formed structure is what scientists call Resistant Starch Type 3. It is physically and chemically resistant to the digestive enzymes in your small intestine, meaning it effectively ghosts your metabolic system. Instead of being absorbed as sugar, this crystalline starch travels entirely untouched into your large intestine, where it transforms from a simple fuel source into a powerful prebiotic. Once it reaches your colon, your gut microbiome begins to ferment this starch, producing short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which heal the gut lining, dampen systemic inflammation, and improve your overall insulin sensitivity. The ultimate pro move here is the realization that this molecular lock is permanent. Even if you reheat that rice or those potatoes the next day, the crystalline bonds remain largely intact. You have effectively performed a biological hack, stripping away the high-octane sugar hit while retaining the culinary satisfaction. You are no longer just eating a side dish. You are consuming Fiber Plus, a high-performance functional food that offers all the comfort of a starch with only a fraction of the metabolic cost. To truly master the mechanics of the meal, you have to intercept the digestion process before it even leaves your mouth, effectively deploying what I call a molecular monkey wrench into your body's sugar processing factory. The primary antagonist in this scenario is a hyper-efficient enzyme known as alpha amylase, which resides in both your saliva and your small intestine. This enzyme acts like a pair of high-speed biological scissors designed specifically to snip complex carbohydrate chains into simple, rapid-fire glucose molecules the second they hit your tongue. Without intervention, alpha amylase works with such relentless speed that a piece of sourdough can be converted into a massive blood sugar spike before it even finishes transit through your stomach. However, you can execute a sophisticated signal jam by introducing acetic acid, the active compound in vinegar, into your system roughly 10 to 15 minutes before your first bite. When acetic acid enters the digestive tract, it fundamentally alters the biochemical environment, effectively temporarily deactivating these sugar-snipping scissors. This isn't just a minor delay. It is a profound shift in metabolic signaling. By putting alpha amylase on a temporary timeout, you prevent the instantaneous flood of glucose from overwhelming your bloodstream. Instead of a violent, jagged peak in your insulin levels, which inevitably leads to the dreaded 3 p.m. energy crash and increased fat storage, the acid forces your system to process those same carbohydrates as a slow, manageable, and sustained metabolic trickle. To execute this acidic break with professional precision, you must avoid the social media influencer mistake of taking a concentrated, undiluted shot. Straight vinegar is essentially liquid acid rain for your tooth enamel and the sensitive lining of your esophagus. The master protocol requires you to dilute 1 tablespoon of a high-quality vinegar, whether it's apple cider, red wine, or a sharp balsamic, into at least 8 ounces of filtered water. To maximize safety and efficacy, use a straw to bypass your teeth entirely, ensuring the acetic acid reaches the gut where it can begin its work as a chemical speed bump. This 10-minute priming window transforms your internal machinery from a vulnerable sponge for sugar into a fortified high-performance engine capable of extracting energy without the inflammatory fallout. To truly master your metabolic response, you must move away from the bucket mentality, the common mistake of treating your stomach like a catch-all container where ingredients are tossed in at random. Instead, you need to view your digestive tract as a high-precision biological filter that requires a specific, layered assembly to function correctly. Imagine your stomach as a high-speed funnel leading directly into the delicate environment of your small intestine. When you consume naked carbs, a piece of bread, a handful of fruit, or a side of rice, on an empty stomach, they slip through that funnel with zero resistance, hitting your bloodstream in a matter of minutes and triggering a hormonal emergency. To prevent this, you must implement the stratification protocol, a non-negotiable sequencing rule that builds a physical, viscous mesh at the base of your internal funnel. The first layer of this filter is the foundation, consisting exclusively of fiber-rich green vegetables or bitter salads. When you lead with fiber, you aren't just getting nutrients. You are creating a physical, gelatinous barrier that coats the walls of the small intestine, effectively shrinking the pores of your absorption surface. This is followed immediately by the buffer, composed of proteins and healthy fats like eggs, fish, or avocado. These macronutrients act as a biological gatekeeper, triggering the release of hormones that slow down gastric emptying, the speed at which food leaves the stomach. By the time you reach the fuel, those starches and sugars you've been craving, the intestinal net is already fully constructed and reinforced. Instead of the starch exploding into your blood like a broken dam, it is forced to navigate a complex, multi-layered labyrinth of fiber and fat. This deconstructed eating approach ensures that the glucose molecules can only be absorbed at a measured, consistent pace. The difference is staggering. You can consume the exact same number of calories, but by simply changing the order of your fork, you transform a metabolic disaster into a steady, reliable stream of high-performance energy that keeps your brain sharp and your fat-burning systems online for hours. To truly master your metabolic health, you must realize that your body does not function as a static, 24-hour processing plant. Rather, it operates as a finely tuned circadian engine that shifts its fundamental chemistry based on the position of the sun. At the heart of this rhythm is your pancreas, the command center for insulin production, which follows a strict internal biological clock. During the daylight hours, specifically between dawn and mid-afternoon, your body is in its high-performance phase. In this window, your insulin sensitivity is at its physiological peak, meaning your cells are wide open and primed to mobilize glucose into energy with surgical efficiency. You are quite literally a solar-powered glucose processing powerhouse. However, as the sun sets and your brain's pineal gland begins secreting melatonin to prepare your system for restorative sleep, a fascinating molecular conflict occurs. Melatonin doesn't just make you sleepy, it acts as a direct biochemical off switch for your insulin response. This is a survival mechanism designed to keep your blood sugar stable while you fast overnight, but it creates a massive tactical problem for the modern eater. When you consume a heavy load of carbohydrates late at night, like a massive bowl of pasta or a sugary dessert at 9 p.m., you are essentially trying to run a high-energy factory during a scheduled blackout. Because your sleepy pancreas is already powering down, it cannot produce the insulin required to clear that sugar from your system. The result is a metabolic disaster. Glucose lingers in your bloodstream up to 20% longer than it would during the day, triggering a cascade of elevated cortisol and systemic inflammation. Instead of burning that fuel, your body is forced to sequester it into long-term fat storage. To navigate this, you must adopt the front-loading protocol. Shift your most significant oak log carbohydrates to your lunch window when your metabolic engine is at full throttle. The golden rule for elite metabolic management is to establish a strict 3-hour buffer, ensuring your final carbohydrate-heavy bite occurs at least 180 minutes before your head hits the pillow. This allows your system to clear the deck and return to a baseline state, ensuring you enter the deep, fat-burning stages of sleep rather than spending the whole night fighting a sugar-induced fire. If you find yourself in a situation where the meal was too heavy or the sequencing was impossible to maintain, you don't have to surrender to the metabolic fallout. Instead, you can activate the muscle siphon, a physiological bypass that utilizes your skeletal muscle as the ultimate emergency drain for excess blood sugar. Under normal conditions, your body relies on a massive inflammatory surge of insulin to unlock your cells and shove glucose inside for storage. However, when a muscle fiber contracts, it triggers a unique biochemical mechanism known as insulin-independent glucose uptake. Essentially, the physical act of movement causes glucose transporters, specifically GLUT4 receptors, to migrate to the surface of the muscle cells and pull sugar directly out of the bloodstream without needing the pancreas to intervene. By timing your movement within the 15-minute window, the critical period immediately following your last bite, you are effectively opening the sugar gates at the exact moment the glucose levels begin to climb. A simple, low-intensity 10-minute stroll acts like a biological vacuum, suctioning up circulating glucose to fuel your stride before it ever has a chance to cause microvascular damage or be sequestered into fat cells. But the most revolutionary weapon in this protocol for the modern, desk-bound professional is the soleus siphon. Recent breakthroughs in metabolic science have identified the soleus muscle in your calf as a metabolic unicorn. Unlike almost any other muscle in the human body, the soleus is composed of specialized slow-twitch fibers that are wired for extreme endurance. It can stay active for hours without fatiguing, and, more importantly, it has a unique ability to prioritize local blood glucose and fats as fuel over stored glycogen. By performing repetitive seated calf raises, simply lifting your heels while keeping your toes planted while you work or take a call, you engage this hidden pump. This soleus push-up can significantly blunt a post-meal glucose spike while you remain completely stationary. The critical nuance here is to keep the intensity low and slow. High-intensity exercise can actually trigger a fight-or-flight response that causes the liver to dump more sugar into the blood. Conversely, these low-effort contractions provide the perfect zero-sweat metabolic intervention. You are effectively walking off your lunch while finishing an email, turning a sedentary afternoon into a high-efficiency period of active metabolic clearance. Ultimately, achieving metabolic mastery isn't about the grueling restriction of a diet. It is about the sophisticated execution of a strategic system. We are moving away from the outdated paradigm of calorie counting and moving toward biological leverage. To turn these high-level concepts into a functional reality, you must internalize the 5-step override protocol, a daily mission designed to align your lifestyle with your internal chemistry. First, initiate the prep phase by utilizing the crystal hack. Cook and refrigerate your starches at least 24 hours in advance to force the molecular transition into resistant starch. Second, execute the prime phase 10 minutes before your first bite. Deploy the enzyme jammer by drinking a diluted vinegar solution to put your sugar-snipping enzymes on a temporary timeout. Third, adhere to the build phase on your plate. Construct the intestinal net by strictly sequencing your meal. Veggies first, protein second, and carbs as the grand finale. Fourth, honor the sync phase by aligning your fuel intake with the solar clock. Schedule your most significant oak log carbohydrate loads for lunch, ensuring you close the kitchen at least 3 hours before bed to avoid the melatonin-induced insulin shutdown. Finally, engage the drain phase immediately post-consumption. Use the muscle siphon by taking a 10-minute walk or performing seated soleus raises to vacuum up circulating glucose before it can do damage. The beauty of this framework is that it is modular. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Simply stop fighting your biology and start outsmarting it. Pick just one of these tactical overrides to implement today, and you will begin to feel the immediate stabilization of your energy and the sharpening of your mental focus. You now possess the biological blueprint to reclaim your health without sacrificing the foods you love. You have the tools, you have the science, and you have the strategy. Now go enjoy that meal with the confidence of someone who finally knows how to handle it.